Pandit Gopi Krishna, scientists have become very specialized in their knowledge and very one-pointed in their dedication to their work. Is this a healthy way to arouse Kundalini? And is this a sign of a healthy approach to further evolution of the brain?
The answer to this question rests on what would nature expect of us in the interest of survival and happiness of every member of the race. A well-proportioned mind with a good knowledge of various departments of science, art, philosophy, or a lopsided knowledge of one subject to the exclusion of others. The answer is obvious. What would be necessary for our survival, peace and happiness is a knowledge of the various departments which are closely linked with our own life and survival. A man must have sufficient knowledge of, say, geography, history, medical sciences, nutrition, sex, social behavior, politics, even a little of engineering, horticulture, and the rest, so that he is able to feel home and to adjust himself to his environment in a befitting way. He knows what he has to eat, how he can live better by a historical knowledge of the past, how he can build even a shelter for himself if he is a poor man, how he can cook a healthy meal, what ingredients should he select, and above all, how he should behave with that most powerful urge, the sex urge in himself, so that he leads a balanced, harmonious, and happy life. How will it avail a man who is specialized in one branch of knowledge, say astronomy or chemistry, if he is cast at a place where he has to depend on his own resources to live? He would not be able to do anything. There is a nice story related by Rumi in this connection. He says that one day a great mathematician wanted to cross a river. He called a boatman and boarded his boat and asked him to carry him across. The river was in flood. When they had gone a short distance, the mathematician condescendingly asked the boatman, "Have you any knowledge of mathematics?" The boatman replied, "No, sir." He said, "You have then wasted half of your life." While they were crossing the river, which was swollen, that day they came across a strong whirlpool, and the boat began to swim round and round. The boatman asked, "Sir, do you know swimming?" He said, "No." The boatman said, "Then, sir, you have wasted all your life." So this is what can result from overemphasis on one subject alone to the exclusion of others. I find from the books published during these days that the specialists in each subject do everything in their power to appear original and more informative than their colleagues. In this process, they work day and night and cite hundreds of references of other authorities to make their point. The result is huge volumes of erudition, which convey very little to the reader. They may be of interest to other specialists in that branch of knowledge, but to the average human being, they mean very little. I also see that sometimes even good writers on one particular subject, I should say specialists in that subject, have very little knowledge of other subjects, with the result that they make great mistakes in presenting the whole panorama of human life to the reader. It is absolutely necessary for any great intellectual who comes forward to guide and instruct the race to have sufficient knowledge of every important subject before he comes forward to write on one particular subject, seeing the whole in one perspective and not in the context of his own subject alone. Another instance which I would cite is that many psychologists who are writing on religion, mystical experience, or conversion, or personal transformation, do so without almost any knowledge of the ancient traditions, especially of India. From my point of view, even the ablest mind would need years of study to make himself conversant with the mystical literature of the world. And without this painstaking study, a grasp of the subject is impossible. I have seen many writers dabbling in mysticism without knowing what the experience actually unfolds. This is only possible if they read exhaustively the stories of mystics of all lands and then try to integrate that information with their own specialized knowledge of the mind. This is not done. Generally, we find that each writer cites some other writer or someone who says he had a mystical experience without ever having studied the originals of those who are known all the world over to have genuine mystical experiences and whose own writings corroborate this fact. It is not only on this. Some of the physicists of modern times are trying to explain the latest findings in physics with the mystical tradition. They cite passages from this book or that book, say a Chinese book or an Indian text or a Persian book, to support their ideas that the modern theories of physics correspond to mystical experience. This is another blunder and shows complete lack of knowledge of the mystical experience. Mystical experience does not make the human mind into a microscope so that it is able to see matter at its lowest levels. Nothing of the sort. Mystical experience relates to consciousness, to mind. Matter is eliminated. It enlarges the mind. It shows the mind in its real state as the reality behind matter. It doesn't show the matter at its finest levels, nor do the modern theories of physicists in any way explain mystical experience. Mystical experience does not establish a link between the human mind and the finest levels of matter. On the contrary, what mystical experience does is to show the universe of the mind. And when we see the universe of the mind, when we see that mind is like an ocean, we find that the physical world is reduced to a shadow or a phantom. We don't see there subnuclear particles or atomic particles as are envisaged, or the energies as are envisaged by modern physicists. Not at all. What we perceive is consciousness, is a living universe, is life. And what is more, this concept of subnuclear particles or energies is a formulation of the mind. It is the mind that shows us the universe as we see it in our everyday life. It is the mind which then tries to reach to the depths of the material universe and postulates such things as molecules, atoms, nuclear particles, subnuclear particles, quarks, and the rest. These are all intellectual formulations according to the mystical philosophers. They are manifestations of Prakriti. This Prakriti in the mystical state appears to be an illusion, a phantom, a shadow. So there is virtually no relationship between the mystical experience and the universe as we see with our own normal vision, nor any link between what the scientists say about the physical world or its constituents. What mystical experience reveals is the majesty of the mind. It is sovereign nature. It is infinite expanse. It is immortal nature. There is absolutely nothing which would remind one of what the physicists say, the energy fields, the quarks, the subnuclear particles, and the rest. I wonder how can any wise scientist treat the latest theories of physics on par with mystical experience or correlate the two. So we see that in this specialization, we are not able to focus our mind in a balanced way on all the branches of knowledge and to take a holistic view of the universe. I am sure that not in too distant a future, the system will be revised and every student will first be instructed in those sciences which are closer to his own life and survival. After that, they may be given a little more extended knowledge of different branches so that there is an advance beyond what we have learned so far. But from the point of view of a healthy brain and progressive evolution, a well-proportioned mind, balanced in its knowledge, balanced its outlook on life, open, broad, compassionate, and pure, is much more suited for this natural process of evolution than a mind stuffed with knowledge of one particular branch and made to live like that all his life. It is in fact an impediment in the evolution of the brain. As soon as experiments on Kundalini are done, it will even be seen that too much knowledge and excessive pursuit of one subject to the exclusion of other branches of knowledge can even act as an obstruction to evolution. This is perhaps the reason why all great mystics, including the prophets of mankind, were not great scholars, and some of them were not even fully literate. This is an example by which we should profit and try to adjust our educational system also to the needs of evolutionary mechanism in human beings.
You have said that in the nuclear age, only men and women with illumined consciousness will be entrusted with political power. Why?
In what class of human beings do you place the present day leaders and rulers of mankind? Are they beyond human frailties, balanced, self-controlled, disciplined, with an open mind and a penetrating intellect? Or are they all as much influenced by human faults and frailties as other people? If you look closely at the governments of a day, you will find that the president or prime minister or a dictator or a few individuals at the top influence the whole policy and determine the course of conduct which it adopts in relation to other powers and nations of the earth. We know very well what happened in Russia in the time of Stalin, in China in the time of Mao Zedong, in the United States in the time of Carter and Nixon, and how the policy of that particular country was influenced by the behavior of the president or the dictator. We know at present what is happening in various countries of the world and how the men at the top influence the course of action adopted by millions of its inhabitants towards their neighbors or rivals. If the head of a state is broad-minded, pacific, blessed with far-sightedness and a knowledge of human nature, his period of administration would be different from one who is prejudiced, close-minded, aggressive, or vindictive. Lives and happiness of millions upon millions of the subjects of a country depends on the whims or fancies of their leaders. This system of administrations went well, as there was never a danger of total destruction for a nation or for the whole of mankind. And the utmost they could do was to cause limited damage on their foes or on those who rebelled against them. But with the powers which science has placed in the hands of the heads of states, of causing total destruction of the countries with which they are at war, or even annihilating the whole race, the situation is quite different. It would be blindness, virtually suicide, to continue the old method and put people at the top of the administration who are still prone to passions and emotions as much as the common individuals, who have not yet learned to control their feelings or to have judgments which go beyond their personal likes and dislikes, for whom the happiness of others and peace of the world and avoidance of death and bloodshed is as dear to the heart as their own safety and happiness. We do not have people of this type at the helm of affairs of the various nations of the world. The very system by which they come into power is faulty, an outmoded relic of the past, belonging to a time when mankind had not come into the possession of the terrific power which now science has placed in her hands. What should be then the effort of the people of the world if they want to live in peace and avoid the frightful consequences of an internecine war? Their effort should be to choose people who are by nature pacifists, open-minded, without pride or prejudice, humane, compassionate, merciful, and whose whole aim should be not only to see their own nations advancing and progressing, but also the other nations of the earth. You can have this type of a ruler or an administration only one who is chastened and purified by the fire of Kundalini. They would resemble Buddha, Christ, and the other great enlightened sages and philosophers of the earth. It is of this type of ruler of which Plato is speaking in his Republic. The time has come now when the administrators and rulers of a land are to be chosen with meticulous care to avoid a catastrophe. You cannot escape this position. It is not possible for mankind to entrust the safety of nations or of the whole race into hands that are not firm and that do not possess the capabilities and the self-control of spiritual titans who alone can now govern the race.
At present, our leaders in government are generally advised by specialists. Doesn't that provide a sufficient safeguard?
It certainly could, provided the specialists themselves were balanced, well informed about other branches of knowledge, humane and far-sighted. But unfortunately, that is not the case. On the contrary, specialization in one branch of knowledge has an adverse effect on the all-round efficiency of a brain. Recently, I read a book by a well-known specialist who is advising the United States government on nuclear strategy. He writes in that book that the earth can sustain 13 times the present population. He could not envision what it meant if China alone has 13 billion human beings living on the soil and India 8 billion. What chaos will occur there? So these specialists generally sitting in their easy chairs imagine every sort of a thing which a more penetrating and open-minded intellect, which has not become disproportionate by learning too much of one grant of knowledge, will reject as hopeless. From my own point of view, specialization beyond a certain limit has an adverse effect on the brain, and one who is a specialist is never able to present a balanced view of his knowledge to the world. He lays an undue emphasis only on his particular branch or his particular subject without understanding or even conceding the same importance to others. In an article that recently appeared in the Omni magazine, a well-known biologist criticizes the physicists for believing that there can be life in other planets of the universe, or for presenting other views of life than those advocated by evolutionists. This gentleman seems to be so much influenced by his own knowledge of biology that he is not prepared to accept the views expressed by the specialist in any other branch. For instance, he forgets when he is criticizing physicists that the picture of physics on which the Darwinian theory of evolution was built is ended. We have now a different picture altogether, an undefinable energy working, but which can only be apprehended by the aid of an observer, or in other words, which has no absolute value apart from the mind which observes it. In that sense, mind and the observed universe become inseparable. The very process of observation can affect that energy. The location of the observer can affect that energy. And what is more important, the absolute time and space of the former physicists and philosophers is no longer there now. If the very ground on which biology has been built is cut under its feet, is it not time that the biologists should also try to adjust their own subject to the needs of the time? But what we see is that because of this specialization, they continue to harp on the ideas and theories which had a relative value before, but which need recasting to adapt themselves to the modern view of the physical world. Let me explain it further. Our cells are formed of atoms and molecules. Since now molecules and atoms do not exist as solid particles, but only fields of energy, which depends for the forms which it presents us on our senses and the mind, and which apart from them we cannot imagine at all. What is then the picture of biology at this time? I would like him to explain this fact. What picture has now the present theories of biology when it is interpreted on the basis of the present day knowledge of the physical world? But they do not do it. They just continue to harp. This is a great flaw in specialization, that it continues to repeat the same story without being able to adjust itself or to correspond its own knowledge of that particular subject with the advance made in other subjects. And this can be very dangerous for the race. Therefore, wisdom lies in changing the present system of education, in making specialization secondary to the evolutionary needs of the human brain. Every individual must be developed in as many branches of knowledge as is possible, so that he has a balanced and harmonious view of the universe. Please do not think that specialization or science are absolutely necessary for the progress of humanity. We produced the greatest minds ever born, even in the Dark Ages, or in epochs thousands of years before the birth of Christ, as for instance in India, Egypt, and other civilizations of the past. It is not at all necessary that we should have machineries, technological knowledge, science for the production of great minds. The aim of nature is that humanity should evolve towards the target destined for her, not that she should fly in aeroplanes or dive into the oceans or fly or race in cars. What she needs is healthy bodies and evolved minds. These can be created even if men live in humbler conditions, provided their life is healthy and the mind is sound. The present way of life, its fever, its tensions, its pressures, and the comforts or luxuries which surround us is not the ideal life for evolution. It is even a stumbling block to this process. Perhaps man lived more rationally in certain periods of time when there was greater exuberance of genius, as for instance, during the Greek times, the times of Upanishads in India, and a few centuries before Christ in China than they are doing now. Please do not think that the present age is a great age for mankind. On the contrary, there are indications that it is an age of decline. The advancement in science or technology is no guarantee that the human mind is progressing, evolving, advancing, and not declining as has happened in all the great civilizations of the past. Specialization is in no case a healthy form of mental exercise. People whose brains are overcrowded with book knowledge can be even a danger to the race.
This sounds rather incredible, that you are actually saying that we may have to abandon science?
I agree that what I am saying sounds incredible or fantastic. But if we were to look at the whole position in a dispassionate way, I am sure you will agree with me. What would you do with a branch of knowledge of which the potential for evil becomes greater than the potential for good? What would you do with science if a nuclear war is fought, resulting in the destruction of all you have achieved during the last 5,000 years? Would you continue to keep it in the present form?
No, not at all.
Then I just speak the facts. I am just explaining the position. Bluntly, you cannot proceed in the same way as you have been doing during the last 1 century. You cannot allow science to go unchecked in producing the most destructive weapons for mankind. You cannot continue to have a science which is a handmaiden, ambitious dictators and stupid administrators. The race has to view the whole position in the light of its survival and happiness. Whatever the benefits of science, if the evils which it can generate preponderate, it will have to abandon it. And it will do it precipitately if a nuclear war is fought. So the possibility is there. What I am suggesting is to keep science from doing the damage which it can if it continues to act in the present way. This is also the danger that will occur if the present forms of government continue, if mankind remains divided, and if political leaders are allowed a free hand to do what they like. It is to me incredible that at this advanced stage of our knowledge, after an experience of at least 2,000 years during the historical period, we still allow a few individuals more importance than the millions in a nation. No sane humanity in future will do it. They are human beings, as fallible, as frail, as weak, as ignorant, as short-sighted as the others are. And you place in their hands vast countries, resources, the lives of millions, and also the power of destroying not only other nations but their own. I think mankind will have to reconsider this position, devise other methods of administration, other methods of selection of the administrators, and also try to find a class of men and women which can do the least harm to her. We have to see this whole position in the perspective of the nuclear weapons, which have changed the entire strategy of war. This is a threat. We should act as an incentive to our thinking so that we may be able to eliminate every possibility of the dangers that can arise out of it. How can you do that? Unless you change the methods of science, you change the attitudes of scientists, unless you make them independent so that they are not in a position to prostitute their talents in the service of dictators, administrators, terrorists, and megalomaniacs. You have to do it for your own safety. If you do not do that, you always expose yourself to instantaneous death or lifelong agony in the nuclear age.
But cannot the efforts of these specialists or political advisors avert a nuclear war?
They could if they had control over the events that take place in the world. A sudden act of arrival, a sudden invasion, or a revolution, or a coup, which affects the balance of power, or the interests of a nuclear nation, can create such a provocative position that a war can become inevitable. The act of a megalomaniac or a schizophrenic on the chair of power in a country, or the ambitions of a man with a mad dreams of power can act as a spark all on a sudden that can kindle a fire on the whole of earth. You have no control over the circumstances prevailing on the earth. You can have no control over the events that take place day after day. It is a very short-sighted man indeed who believes that the strategies or diplomatic actions of a country or of a few countries can avert forever the possibility of a nuclear war. It is indeed a very poor mind, ill-informed about history, which can entertain dreams of this sort. No one knows what circumstances will transpire and what events will take place in the years ahead. One mistake, one unbearable provocation, one act of sabotage, even by a terrorist group, can start a nuclear war. Wisdom lies in understanding that a nuclear war means utter damage and destruction of a nation from which it can never recover for decades, or even its total decimation and the annihilation of other nations side by side. When we keep this terrible vision before our eyes, then and only can we know that it is imperative that all the race should from this moment start to act in a way which prevents a holocaust as effectively as possible. Specialists, politicians, rulers, presidents, and prime ministers will not be able to help us to tide over this difficulty, as they cannot prevision what will happen in the future and will be caught as unawares in the event of a sudden change or a sudden provocation as anyone else. In fact, this is the way in which wars erupted during this century. We see that many places on the earth are now plague spots from which a major war can start. Any one of these spots can provide this spark to kindle a fire. The wisdom lies in trying to limit the nuclear armaments and then to destroy them altogether. This bane, this poison, should be totally removed from the earth. So long as nuclear weapons continue to be stockpiled or to be stored at different places, the danger of annihilation will always confront the race.
All the benefits that we've had in the last century as the result of science and technology have really come about as the result of specialization. So why shouldn't we just continue?
I do not believe they have come from specialization. The discoveries and inventions generally were made by men and women who were not specialists, who were not even as well informed about science as others. Specialization does not allow the brain to grow as it should. Apart from specialization, we need other powers and potentialities of the human brain. For instance, let us take the case of the great scientists and inventors during the last 300 years. Let us take the discoverer of steam, of electricity, of the gramophone, of telegraph, telephone. They were not specialists. They were well-informed people, but they had a flash of genius. Specialization is not necessary for genius. And perhaps you know that some of the geniuses were not even well educated. It is a fallacy to suppose that overcrowding the brain with books and books and books is really beneficial for the race. It is not. We need brains that are more in communion with the cosmic intelligence rather than those which are filled with book knowledge. The specialists only act as industrious ants to execute what has been discovered by intuitive brains. So those people who parade their knowledge and turn out volume after volume of erudition are but industrious ants and will be treated as such by the well-informed people of the times to come.
What you say sounds very rational, but why then is there this craze for specialization?
Because we still do not understand the working of the brain. Even our best psychologists are not aware that the human mind is in a state of evolution and that it has to act in a certain disciplined way in all things to allow the evolutionary processes full scope to work. the reason why they devote so much time to study, why their books are filled with references to so many volumes, why there is such a mixture of authorities in their books is because they believe that erudition or book learning is good for the progress of their and improvement of their mind. But contrary is the case. It is this overcrowding of the brain which is responsible for the intellectual confusion existing at present in various branches of knowledge, and also for the stagnation of the mind and lack of understanding of the spiritual nature of man. We are overcrowding the mind so much that it is not possible for us to go more than skin deep into the nature of man and to find that the soul within is something which is already perfect in knowledge, an ocean from which all that we know and discover flows out. We find before our eyes child prodigies in mathematics, in art, in science. Where did their knowledge come? It came from the depths of their soul. It can come even in the adults, provided we allow mind freedom and proper opportunity to gain that knowledge. In all education, in all learning, we are only trying to allow the knowledge in our soul to express itself.